Hello, welcome to another episode of Travelogue here on Sparks 1524. I'm Nathaniel Miller. Now, as you're driving along modern Highway 98 in Fort Walton Beach, as you get down toward the Brooks Bridge, you will see a small hill covered in trees. This is the Fort Walton Beach Indian Temple Mound. Now, this mound started well over 1,200 years ago. The original people that lived here were called the Deptford culture. Now, these cultures get their names from the first place that enough artifacts are found to identify it as a separate culture. But the Deptford culture vanished about 1,200 years ago. Following the Deptford culture's disappearance, the Pensacola culture, which is a branch of the larger Mississippi culture that swept across the southeast of the modern United States, moved into the area. Like I said, they found it abandoned already, so they just took over the site. Interestingly enough, there is a Fort Walton culture here in the southeast, and it was named for this mound. But later research through the 20th century revealed that the Fort Walton culture was a very separate culture from the artifacts found at this mound. So if you see the Fort Walton culture mentioned in literature about Native American tribes and heritage, they're not referring anymore to the mound in the city of Fort Walton Beach. Anywhere you see a mound, these were community-wide, long-term projects. And when I say long-term, I'm talking generational. It's easy in the modern world with our excavators and power equipment that can move thousands of tons of earth in a few hours. We don't think anything of watching a bulldozer pile up a hill that's taller than a house. But when you're moving all that earth by hand, it's labor-intensive and it takes a long time. These mounds, that's part of the significance to the communities because the generations would continually be building them up. The top of the mound housed a temple or some other sacred site, and usually the village chief's residence. As elites died, many of them were buried in the mound as each successive generation lifted it higher. The Pensacola people that lived at this site also vanished into effectively thin air, and we don't know what happened to the community that was living here. What I can tell you is that whatever happened to them did not include European colonization. When the Spanish arrived here in the 16th century, the site was already long abandoned. It is entirely possible the Spanish didn't even think this was anything but a natural hillock. In the Civil War, the Walton Guards set up camp next to the mound. They were a Confederate unit that was assigned to protect this part or that part of the Gulf Coast from Union invasion. Among other weapons, there are two 18-pound cannons, and these cannons were so effective against ships that these cannons could easily bounce a cannonball off any ship that sailed in so close to the beach it got grounded. Cannons were completely ineffective. Fortunately for the Confederates, no Union forces came ashore in the modern Fort Walton Beach area. Now, the Walton Guards were eventually yanked out of this area and sent north to join other Confederate armies. They spiked and buried their cannons because these things were useless and left. Flash forward into the 21st century. After many excavations through the 20th century in the mound, one of the cannons was actually found, and that cannon, which was stationed in that area on that site, is now on display outside the Temple Mound. The name Camp Walton stuck as this area developed. Later became Fort Walton and then eventually renamed to the city of Fort Walton Beach. As the 20th century dawned, though, and the South developed better roads, the railroad network expanded, this area started to become a tourist hub. It's been a tourist hub for a very long time. Today, the city of Fort Walton Beach maintains this site as the City of Fort Walton Beach Heritage Park and Cultural Center. Right next to the mound itself is the Indian Temple Mound Museum, where you can see many of the artifacts that have been unearthed in this area and from this mound, including what is believed to be the oldest pot ever found in Northwest Florida. The fact that both the Deptford culture people and the Pensacola culture people just vanished means that this mound kind of became a time capsule that froze. The Temple Mound Museum is very easy to walk through. It will not take you that long. In fact, they're working on relocating the gift shop and admission area to a new addition that's going to be built on the building in order to open that floor space up for a lot more exhibits. But the Temple Mound is not the only thing in the Heritage Park and Cultural Center. As the area developed, modern services started to be needed. In 1911, the Camp Walton Schoolhouse was built. It opened in 1912. It was a one-room schoolhouse. A few years later, they actually added a second room onto it to house the growing high school population. In 1918, the Garnier Post Office opened up on Garnier Bayou, around which part of Fort Walton Beach is built. The increased population down here meant the mail flow was getting bigger. Now, the main post office was up in Crestview, but you needed a branch office down here to handle all the mail. The Camp Walton Schoolhouse was in use until 1936, and after that, it was everything from apartments to military barracks during the war to apartments again to other uses before it fell into disrepair. 1974, it was moved to First Street and taken over as a museum building. Later on, it was joined by the Garnier Post Office that was uprooted from up on Garnier Bayou and brought down to First Street to join the Camp Walton Schoolhouse as exhibits on the beginning of the city of Fort Walton Beach. Well, in 2006, both of those structures were uprooted and moved to their present location on Highway 98 as part of the city of Fort Walton Beach Heritage Park and Cultural Center. It's a great little one-stop. You can walk around in just half a day and get an idea of how this area began, of all the stories that have been lived out here for thousands of years. A third building was added. This is a modern construction, but it looks like a Civil War shack. In fact, it's almost identical to the Garnier Post Office, and it was built specifically to tell the story of the Walton Guards and all the excitement that they didn't have in this area since there really was no Civil War fighting right here. All of that is in this one location. The grounds are open free to the public from dawn to dusk. So you can just walk around the grounds. You can walk around the outside of the schoolhouse and the post office. You can circle the mound. There is a lovely viewing platform. You can climb up on top of the mound. And the structure on top of the mound is a modern recreation of what we believe a Pensacola culture temple or chief's residence would have looked like. And it's based on the artifacts found. It's based on the construction, and the size is based on remains that were found in the ground. Even wood, when it rots away, leaves a stain in the soil for thousands of years if that area is not disturbed. So archaeologists can still figure out the layout and floor plans of these ancient buildings. Take heart, though. The building, and especially its thatched-looking roof, are actually all made out of concrete and hurricane-resistant materials. So you can walk around the grounds all day into the evening. If you want to check out the museum and you want to check out the interior exhibits in the schoolhouse and the post office and the Civil War building, you will need to buy your admission ticket at the museum, but your admission covers all of the sites. Score! You guys got a bonus. A final coda to your visit to the Indian Temple Mound Museum and the Fort Walton Beach Heritage Park should be walking down the street just a scotch to the Gulfview Hotel. Gulfview Hotel is not part of the Heritage Park, but it is the oldest modern building standing in the city of Fort Walton Beach. It was constructed in 1906 as the tourism industry, which still fuels most of our economy, began to build. Like all hotels, though, time eventually passed it by. Newer facilities with more amenities were developed, and it fell into disrepair. But it finally just got to a point where it was abandoned. It was about to be torn down until some civic organizations stepped up to save it. They moved the hotel not that far, just down the street, but they picked it up and moved it, closed Highway 98 for a couple hours while they did this, to its present location. Today, the hotel's first floor houses the Fort Walton Beach Visitor Center, while the second floor holds private offices. It is a neat little structure to walk down because you can kind of get an idea of what it would have been like to vacation back in 1906. We now return you to the regularly scheduled conclusion of your regularly scheduled travel log. Thank you for your time. Well, those are my thoughts, and that's what I learned at my most recent visit to the Indian Temple Mound Museum. I'd love to hear what you think. Please leave a comment down in the description. If you're interested in visiting the Indian Temple Mound Museum or the entire Fort Walton Beach Heritage Park and Cultural Center, I've put their website down below in the description. Check them out. There's a lot to do here, a lot of neat stories. Feel free, please share this video if you think there's anybody who would find it interesting. Please do also hit that little like button. It does help the algorithm so people can find me. I'm sure there's about 4 or 5 people on the internet who actually would be interested in this. Finally, if you like what I do, please hit that subscribe button. Until we meet again here on Sparks 1524, I'm still Nathaniel Miller. I still encourage you to get out and go explore, even if it's just down to your local library with maybe a small exhibit. Till we meet again here on Sparks 1524, have a great October as we get ready to start heading toward the holiday season, and always go do some great things.